After the defeat of the last German forces in North Africa in early 1943, the Western Allies had a real strategic decision to make. If they were going to attack German-occupied Europe, where would the attack be made? For the Americans, and indeed for the Germans themselves, the logical place for an attack would be in northern France by the most direct route across from Britain. However, the British argued against the Americans successfully for in 1943 a continuation of a Mediterranean strategy, with the invasion first of all of Sicily and then of Italy. The effect of this was an Italian coup d'etat, overthrowing the Italian government of Mussolini. The new Italian government made peace. The only effect of that, however, was that German forces in Italy turned themselves into occupying forces and delayed the Allied attack up the Italian peninsula through 1943 and 1944.
The Germans had been expecting an attempt to liberate France since America entered the war. The Fortress Europe policy was determined to be the best defense. Sections of the coastline that were most likely to be attacked were heavily fortified. Hitler gave Rommel responsibility for coastal defense from Holland to the Loire Valley. He set about it with vigor, strengthening the patchy defenses of the so-called Atlantic Wall. Germany had also been developing new vengeance weapons to use against the Allies. The Luftwaffe had the V-1 flying bomb, an unmanned aircraft packed with explosives, with a sound that would strike terror into the residents of London. As the sound of its faltering motor died, it would plunge to the ground, destroying whatever was underneath it. A more sinister development was the V-2 rocket, developed by Werner von Braun. This was the world's first ballistic missile that could strike with astonishing accuracy at targets as far north as London. Hitler was sure that these new terror weapons would force the British to surrender. The general consensus amongst the German High Command was that a possible Allied assault would take place by the short sea route from Dover to Calais. In fact, the Allies had been amassing a phantom army in the area to convince them that this was the case. But by March, Hitler decided that Normandy was more likely, and he ordered Rommel to strengthen the defences on that area of the coast. But by May, he was now convinced that the main thrust would attack Calais. Despite protests from Rommel, he moved his best panzer divisions north. A German sentry looking out over the English Channel on the 6th of June 1944 would have seen a chilling sight. An unending line of ships the size of a city was heading straight for the Normandy beaches. The Allied invasion had begun. They came ashore on a 60-mile stretch of the coastline, catching the Germans completely by surprise. Bad weather for the past few days had made German reconnaissance impossible, and it was thought no landing would be attempted under those conditions. They couldn't have been more wrong. 1,200 warships and 4,200 landing craft would deliver 6 divisions of American, Canadian and British troops onto 5 locations on the Normandy coast. Immediately, the German guns roared into action at Omaha Beach. over 1,000 Americans would be killed by morning. But the warships were already pounding the German defences, and by late morning, the Americans had broken through. Utah Beach was different. Here the Allied troops easily overcame the German defences. They took the beach within a few hours with only 200 casualties. Gold Beach was also taken easily, and the British 50th Infantry broke through and advanced inland. But they were slowed by German counterattacks, leaving them short of their objective of the town of Caen. However, by the end of the day, the Allies had a lodgment, and the second battle for France began. The conquest of the skies over Europe in the preceding months was a decisive factor in the invasion. 11,500 fighters and bombers raced over the Channel to destroy airfields and communication lines. Rommel ordered his panzer divisions forward, but they came under heavy bombardment from Allied aircraft. The next few days saw the Allies consolidating and expanding their bridgeheads, including the setting up of a vast mulberry harbour off the beaches at Arromanches. Rommel attempted counterattacks and fierce fighting took place around Bayeux and Caen. But Allied air power disrupted these attacks, and Rommel was forced onto the defensive. He established a defensive line west of Caen and prevented the British from advancing. Meanwhile, the Americans had beaten off strong resistance and captured the vital port of Cherbourg. Troops, armour and supplies were now pouring ashore. Hitler tried to reassure his commanders that the new V weapons would still win the war for Germany, but they remained unconvinced. Fighting around the town of Caen intensified as the young German defenders fought with ferocious resolve. Years of indoctrination in the Hitler youth had assured the loyalty of thousands of young men, but their fate had been sealed when the first Allied troops landed on the beaches of Normandy. The next few weeks would see the Allies advance across France, despite a number of small victories by the Germans. On the 20th of July, an unsuccessful attempt was made to assassinate Hitler by a group of senior army officers. They had hoped that with Hitler out of the way, the Reich could be led out of the war. The trial that followed would see them all executed. Rommel was implicated in the plot and was forced to commit suicide rather than face trial. The Germans said he died from injuries sustained in an Allied attack and was buried with full military honours. The Allies continued their advance.
The Americans were able to break out from Normandy in an attack which began on the 25th of July, known as Operation Cobra. Even then, Hitler failed to order the retreat in time, and the American forces striking south and then east were able to link up with British forces attacking southwards, creating a giant pocket of encirclement, the Falaise Pocket, in which many German troops died in August 1944. It was a major disaster for the Germans, coupled at the same time with, on the eastern front, a major Soviet offensive, Operation Bagration, which again destroyed the equivalent of a German army group, about 30 divisions. So in July-August 1944, the Germans lose two major battles within days of each other, Normandy in the west and Bagration in the east. And just to put the cap on it, finally the Allies are able to break through the German defences at Monte Cassino, and the day before D-Day, the 5th of June, they reach and liberate Rome.
German defenders were still being ordered to stand to the last man.